superheroes, monster trucks, and professional wrestling. What does all this have in common? Tune in next on the Benchbuster Show to find out. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special Monday edition of the Benchbuster Show, coming to you from sunny Orlando, Florida. Hello everyone, and welcome to this special edition of the Benchbuster Show, coming to you from my condo in sunny Orlando, Florida. Just wanted to do a quick little podcast today to kind of touch base on some wrestling. The one thing about professional wrestling that a lot of people don't understand, don't know, but you gotta have it, is a gimmick. Everyone has got to have a gimmick to get over. You've got to, portray a certain character and live out that character to be successful. And that's not only true in professional wrestling, but it's true in a lot of things. Everything that you go by has a gimmick. You go to restaurants, they have a gimmick. You go to a movie, it has a gimmick. Everything has a gimmick. The world is a gimmick. So I just want to do a quick little podcast to kind of give everyone an idea of what I've done this weekend and my thoughts on a gimmick. So while I've been down here in Orlando, Florida now since Thursday, and everywhere in Orlando is a gimmick. Everywhere I look, there's a gimmick. There's signs on the walls or on the billboards talking about all the theme parks that you can go to. And there's so many of them down here. Disney has 4 or 5. Universal's got a couple. And there's plenty more. But they all have a gimmick. And one of the things that really brought my mind to this and when we talk about this was Saturday night we took our son to the Monster Jam World Finals there in Orlando, and one of the things that really blew me away was first of all, our seats. We thought we had the best seats in the house. Come to find out, we got a workout just getting to the seats because we were in the very, very, very tip top, the very last aisle, at the very in the Camping World Stadium. And if any of you have ever been to this stadium, it's huge. It's really big. But the cool thing about this stadium that we were at, my son was excited about the Monster Jam, and it was cool. I enjoyed it. But the thing that I took in, because it pertains to wrestling, is this is the building where the greatest wrestler of all time, Nature Boy Ric Flair, had his final match. And while I was getting ready for the Monster Truck Show to start and looking over the horizon to see how bad this storm was that was brewing, I was sitting there thinking, wow, I'm in the same building that my idol, the guy that really got me into wrestling, that really got me wanting to be a wrestler, Ric Flair. This is where he had his last match, and I was just looking at that and just trying to comprehend, how it felt to be in that building on that particular night. I'm sure it was very amazing. But getting back to my story of gimmicks, I'm sitting there watching this monster truck show, and all of a sudden the trucks start to come out, and they're coming from an entryway that looks exactly like a professional wrestling entranceway, complete with laser lights and pyro, and they even had music. And each truck had they had a different name, or they had a different gimmick. So monster trucks have taken their image from professional wrestling. This kind of gives you an idea of how big pro wrestling is in this world, how it pertains to how people look at it and go, wow, this wrestling thing works, so let's see how we can turn it into the same thing. And that's pretty much what Monster Jam's done, although they're a whole different sport. But I guarantee you 95% of the people that go to a Monster Jam show, they go to a pro wrestling show. Why? Because it's gimmicks. They go there. You take your kids to these monster truck shows, and all these different trucks have different images. They all have a different gimmick. And then you go to the souvenir stand, and you got all these T-shirts and all these little toy cars and everything. and it's a gimmick. Really cool concept. So gimmicks are important. Then on Friday, we took our son to the Universal Studios. That was a really fun thing. And guess what was there? Gimmicks. They had superheroes dressed up, like Captain America and Spider-Man and those kind of guys. And man, my son was beside himself. He was having such a fantastic time, and I was having a good time. I was marking out for my son because he was so excited to see these characters and their gimmicks. And it worked. I mean, there was people lined up just to take a 10-second photo with these characters, and it really touched me to see these kids and how excited they got seeing these characters. And it reminded me when I was a little kid growing up, how excited I was when I got to go see a wrestling match. It was a very, very fun trip. Having a good time down here in Florida, although I do dread the 9-10 hour ride back home. But it's nice. It's always nice to get a break and get away and get to spend time with my family. I don't get to do that a whole lot between podcasts and wrestling and work. So it's been a fun weekend. One of the other things I like to touch on, last week I had advertised and said, hey, if fans have any questions, anything you want to know, send in your questions. I'll be glad to answer them. I did get a couple questions I'm going to read online right now and answer. One of the questions was someone said that they could see how passionate I was about pro wrestling. I'm very passionate about it. It's something that I've loved ever since I was a young kid. I was probably 7 or 8 years old when I first saw it. By the time I was 10, I was addicted to it. And now in my 40s, it's pretty much consumed my life since I was about 22 years old. Good or bad, I've always enjoyed wrestling, and I probably always will. And it's a fun thing. It's fun when everyone around you and the people you work with can make it fun. But ever so often, you get on these shows where you got these wannabe bookers or shouldn't be bookers or whatever you want to call them. And they try to put these shows together, and it's total garbage. It really puts a bad name on people like me and the good promoters that I work for. It makes our job a little tougher. But anyway, that was my take on that. And then, so one of the questions was, what got me hooked on wrestling? Well, I guess what got me hooked on it was when I was about, I guess you could say I got hooked when I was 10 years old. So you're looking probably around 1983, 84 years. I started watching wrestling, and my dad kind of introduced me to it, really, and my grandfather, but mostly my dad, because I wasn't really around my grandfather as much as my dad, or he wouldn't be my grandfather. Well, anyway, what hooked me was Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, seeing guys like Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat, Jimmy Valiant. Probably, if I think really hard, the earliest memory I probably would have in wrestling would probably be around 1983. I can remember, seeing guys like Ric Flair and Harley Race and Blackjack Mulligan and Wahoo McDaniels and Jay Youngblood and Ricky Steamboat and Sergeant Slaughter, and going, man, these guys are, they're really, what they do is really cool. And then I guess probably about 85 when the Rock and Roll Express came in and really popped the territory and had their feud with the Russians and the Midnight Express. But the thing I remember the most is when my dad would take me to the Greensboro Coliseum, and I would see the Rock and Roll Express come out of the dressing room. And of course, back then they didn't have these nice aisles like they have now, so the wrestlers would literally come right through the crowd to get to the ring. And I remember seeing Rick and Robert come out, and they would come through the dressing room, and as soon as they got through the people, I couldn't see them anymore. I'm like, where are they at? Where are they at? And then when they'd come out, their shirts would be missing, and the clothes would be ripped off, and you'd see some fan waving their shirt in the air, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing to see how many people like these guys, and just seeing how they walk to the ring and high five people, and I was like, man, I want to do this one day. And I never thought the day would come. I just thought it'd be, everybody has a dream that you have a dream that you dream about, what you want to do. but in the back of your mind, you're like, yeah, I know I'll never do that, but it's still fun to have that dream. So I never really thought I would get to be a pro wrestler, but when the day come, I seized it, and I thought to myself, I'm extremely lucky to be here, so I'm going to put everything in my body and my power and my mind to this to make it work. And when I first started, I had so many people tell me, oh, you're not going to make it, kid. You're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. But I just kept pushing, and I kept pushing. And when one door closed, I went knocked on another door, and I just kept pushing myself and pushing myself. And by the time I was 27 years old, I owned my own wrestling company. I was promoting my own shows, and I was pretty successful at it. And but I wouldn't really think about being successful. I wouldn't cared if there was 5 people in that crowd or 500. I still would have gotten that ring and done the same thing. I still would have wrestled the same. I still would have put on the same show. And I think that's what makes a good professional wrestler, or professional anything, whether you're a musician, a wrestler, or whatever. It doesn't matter how many people are here. You give it your best. You give it your all. And you take care of each other, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day. And then the other thing, the other question is, what keeps me dedicated? It's pretty much the same thing, my love for it. A lot of people get caught up in, everybody has a vice. Some people like to go out to clubs. Some people like to, go on vacation. Some people, whatever it is. Mine's pro wrestling. I don't like to do it as much as I used to when I was in my 20s. I'd wrestle every weekend, but now, with a 4-year-old, that makes it, kind of difficult. So I try to dedicate. I try to balance it out, But I still love it, and I do have a lot of bookings coming up here in the next in June and July. It looks like I'm going to be booked about every weekend, which I'm kind of excited about. So it's going to be fun. But anyway. Back to the gimmicks. So any of you aspiring wrestlers out there that are wanting to be a wrestler, always know you got to have a gimmick to get to where you're going. If you're going to be in music or in whatever, get you a gimmick and figure it out, make it work. Because I assure you, the only way you're going to get through life is you got to have some kind of gimmick. Gimmick is what gets people's attention. If I came down here to Orlando and my son wanted to go to Universal Studios, but there's no pictures of no characters, it's just a big sign that just says, it's black and white, it says Universal Studios. Well, my kid, your kid, or anybody else's kid is not going to be interested in that, because all they see is a black and white word, Universal Studios. Well, that could be anything. But when they see the picture of Captain America and all these other characters on there, the Incredible Hulk and all this, and they're colorful, man, that gets your attention, and it gets those kids' attention, and they're like, Mom, Dad, I want to go there and see Captain America, or I want to go see whoever. That gimmick got them there, and that's my take on gimmicks. Like I said, I don't want to have a very long podcast today. I just wanted to kind of touch base on gimmicks and tell you and kind of bring everybody's attention as far as how many gimmicks are out here in the world. I mean, there's tons of gimmicks. Everything has a gimmick. So if you're going to be a wrestler, a musician, an entertainer, get you a gimmick and figure it out and make it work. And I assure you, it will take you places in this world. Anyway, guys, I really thank you for your time. I appreciate everybody tuning into my podcast. And keep in mind, this Thursday, I'll be having another podcast. It will be my regular podcast, which will be I'll have my special guest on the show, and we'll be talking wrestling and a lot of other stuff. And I know there's been some things happening in wrestling this weekend. This past weekend here in North Carolina that we may touch on. I'm not sure. But any event, please tune into my podcast. Please keep liking us on our Facebook page, and we appreciate everyone. And if you have any more questions, anything you want to know about me or about wrestling in general, send it in to my Facebook page, and I'll be glad to read it online and answer your questions. And we'll see you guys soon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for another edition of the Benchbuster Show. We'll see you next week.